My name is Ghostboy259 and I played Bramble, the Mountain King. Every so often, a game comes by that I can only describe as an experience, and I can't think of a better way to describe Bramble the Mountain King. What started off as a game so light and soft I almost got annoyed at the premise, quickly turned into one of the darkest games I've ever played. If you go in completely blind, then you'll be going into perhaps one of the biggest roller coasters you could possibly imagine in terms of tonal shifts. If you're prepared for that, don't watch this video, dive in and let yourself be taken for a ride. However, before you do, I want to give you a warning before I go any further or before you look at the game, just because, the background visuals will spoil some things, but this game is extremely disturbing and is definitely not suitable for young people as well as those who are sensitive to some of the things listed on the screen right now, and this is just part of the warning that the game gives you at the start, so I feel it's only fair that I pass along that same warning to you. If you still want to hear me talk about the game, but you don't want to see any of the darker, nasty visuals, I'm going to try not to use them, but also just feel free to listen and tab out. If you want to watch me play this game, then you can check out the VOD at youtube.com/realityescapeplays. If you want to watch me play games live and be in the chat while I'm recording, you can follow me at twitch.tv/ghostboy259. And if you want to support the channel on Patreon or recommend me games on Discord, all the links are at realityescape.ca. And while you're here, why not subscribe, because I upload videos every week on games you've maybe never heard of. Bramble the Mountain King is a game where you play as Ole, who is trying to find his sister Lillemor, and in order to do it, you have to go through a ton of different Scandinavian folklore creatures. At first, the game seems very light, almost childish, frolicking through the woods, playing hide and seek with gnomes. The first half an hour is very innocent up until your sister is captured by a troll, forcing Ole to run, and then the real game begins. Apparently, Scandinavian folklore is some of the most messed up stuff you could possibly imagine, and the game does not hold back in any regard. The first signs things are about to take a turn for the worse is when you stumble upon these massive animal traps, and at this point nothing has killed you or damaged you or even really hinted at a greater danger outside of the first troll you've met, and there was no gameplay mechanics associated with that. And these traps are intensely violent, like blood splurting out and your corpse goes flying. It's intense. The game's tone never lets up, and while it does peak, as in negatively peak, around the middle of the game in the swamp area, if you know, you know, the remaining levels use a lot of darkness and sounds and things jumping at you in a non-jump scare manner just to keep you on your toes. I'm not a huge horror game person, mostly because I really dislike jump scares, and while this game had one that really got me, although it may not have been intentional, I think this is as far as I'm willing to go with horror games. I say that knowing very well that in October we'll be doing a month of horror games and I will hate every second. The thing is, I hate horror games when I'm playing them, but I love the lore and I love to watch other people play them. This is one of the few streams I've had where I had an active chat the entire time, and had someone not been there at all times, I probably would have logged off crying and the game incomplete. The game does a really good job at keeping things extremely dark and intense once that first moment hits. If you didn't like the big animal trap killing, that is kind of your sign to get out now, because things only get worse and worse and it keeps you trapped in there. Even during the moments of rest, you really don't feel safe because you know at any second things could take the darkest turn ever. I think the best way to describe the gameplay in Bramble is kind of awkward. There are sneak sections, which is probably one of the few times you have repeating gameplay, and there's a lot of walking around, although it's not really a walking simulator. You have these shooting mechanics that kind of reoccur, although it's always in a different context. There are, I guess, what you would call boss fights that conclude each section before you move on to the next, and the gameplay is just always a little bit different. Sometimes you're searching for things to solve a really basic puzzle, sometimes you have to do an incredibly precise shooter section while dodging incoming attacks with a character that already feels a little bit awkward to control already, sometimes you're just trying to dodge a bunch of attacks coming at you. There's not really a lot that carries over from one boss to the next. What it boils down to is that everything in this game during the boss fights has a pretty distinct timing to it, and it's kind of in a game where it doesn't feel natural to do things quickly and precise in. And while I do think not having it be a walking simulator was the right call, there's just so few gameplay moments throughout the whole game that everything feels different. You never go into a boss fight feeling, oh, I can use the skills I learned before in this one. The puzzles vary a lot too. Sometimes they're super easy, but the hardest one by far is where you have to find these little hidden clues in the very last section of the game, and there's quite literally nothing else that hard anywhere in the game. It's the only part where I had to look it up because I just was getting frustrated walking in circles. I don't want to say for certain that gameplay and puzzles felt like the last priority in the game when they were making it, but everything else is so well done that it wouldn't shock me if you told me that once they were done with the story, they said, okay, now how do we add game to this? I don't necessarily even think it's bad or clunky by all means, it just doesn't feel very refined or consistent, and maybe it's supposed to be like that because it in a way adds to the horror experience. But I also find that with these darker toned games, the longer you stand still, or you get lost, or you have to repeat sections over and over, you begin to become frustrated with the game. The immersion you're feeling becomes lessened, and it takes you out of the story, and the devs did such a good job presenting the story to you up until this point, so it's a bit of a shame. I don't think I could point to one particular mechanic in this game and say this is what I think of when I think of Bramble the Mountain King, because even the shooting mechanic that they teach you at the beginning of the game, it's a very distinct tutorial, doesn't really show up as much as you think it would. The thing about the game is that the story and the presentation, everything else just feels very strong. Even when things were happening and I didn't understand what was happening, it's by far the high point of this game, and I just don't know if the game would be stronger if they removed all the mechanics or if they added more. They could have just leaned more into stealth sections, since that's always pretty scary, but I don't know if that would have fully worked out either. It's not a game where handing me a sword or giving me HP or leaning more into platformings or having puzzles at every step would have made it better, so ultimately I don't know what the answer is. If you look up most reviews of this game, even for people who adored the entire thing, most will still mention that at best the controls and gameplay just feel a little bit odd sometimes. In terms of the story, the game segments itself into pretty distinct parts, and it's all told through this guise as if it were a childhood movie or fairy tale, filled with adventure and wonder, except for the fact that this butcher creature wants to eat you and massacre you, and the only way to escape is to wade through the blood and guts of its former victims. Or when you meet these lovely little gnomes and watch them experience an extremely quick and painful death as they are unable to avoid the animal traps below. Apparently you can get an achievement for saving them all. I did not get that. By the time we get to the ending part of the game, we get a little bit more of what I expected before I opened the game, and while I won't spoil the ending, and while the final encounter was really not that fun for me just because it was very difficult and confusing, the presentation of that final fight was absolutely sensational. Maybe this is kind of spoilers, probably not, but Into the Hall of the Mountain King is a classical music piece. It's one of my favorite classical music pieces of all time, and the entire game I was just kind of waiting for it to show up because it is a royalty-free song. It's from the late 1800s, and it absolutely lives up to the hype when you finally hear that song playing. Ultimately, I really enjoyed Bramble as a whole experience, but it's certainly a game that you have to be in a mood for. I think the roller coaster ride is always a cool thing to be taken on, but this game gets so dark that I couldn't recommend it to people in good conscience without giving people a heads up first that, hey, this is really messed up and you might lose some sleep because of it. Because I imagine more than a few people probably bought this game not looking at reviews or gameplay because they wanted to be surprised and left the game incomplete with an uneasy stomach. But if you don't mind the dark and twisted sides of Scandinavian folklore and can tolerate some less than ideal gameplay moments, then Bramble the Mountain King may be a roller coaster for you. For now, my name is Ghostboy259 and I played Bramble the Mountain King. Next time, I'll play something else. Thanks for watching.